Number 1.
Just to preface, this story happened when I was about 15 years old, so going on 4 years now. I had gone on a cruise with some family and friends. My parents had decided to invite everyone on a huge vacation to the Caribbean. Since we had never really been out of the country before, and everyone was completely excited, we were set to visit the island of St. Thomas, St. Martin, and Puerto Rico, not in that particular order. Each morning during the week, we would just dock outside of the island's borders. We decided that on most of the islands we were simply going to walk around town and maybe get something to eat. But when we heard about Magens Bay in St. Thomas, which was recently voted on Travel Channel as one of the best beaches in the entire world, we knew we had to make an exception and go there. We woke up nice and early. The sun was just rising over the beautiful mountains as we made our way to the minibus that was driven by a local service. There was no way we could have walked there, as the bay was situated on the other side of the mountain, and the quickest route to get there was directly over it. We needed to be back by approximately midday, so the bus driver was the best option. When we arrived at the beach, I'm stunned by the sheer beauty of the location. Everything was lush and green, and the sand was virtually pink, and the water was just north of 75 degrees. Me and my friend Paul were in the water, swimming, and just basically having a good time, when we heard, from far away, what sounded like helicopter blades spinning. "That's odd," I said to Paul. "How on earth would helicopter blades be spinning like that to make enough noise that we could hear it from the other side of the mountain?" That's when it hit us. What we were hearing was either a helicopter with a motor the size of an Oldsmobile, or it was gunfire. Paul shifted uncomfortably in the water. Don't think about it, dude." But I just couldn't get the thought out of my head. Whatever it was making that noise, it had to have been a powerful assault rifle, because the noise was becoming rather sporadic as time went on. After a while, though, the noise completely stopped, and we went back to our families. After me and Paul spent some more time swimming and scuba diving with my uncle, we decided to amp up the fun and rent some kayaks. After we dragged the kayaks from the little hut and threw them into the water, we swam with them out to a reasonable distance and hopped in. Paul paddled up next to me and asked if I wanted to take a journey over to the mountains that were a little off the distance in the center of the bay. Like the adventurous young moron I was, I said yes, and we started paddling recklessly towards the mountains. After paddling for about 15 minutes, our arms were completely numb. "Dylan," he shouted, "I can't go anymore, man. I need to rest." I turned around and saw his face was beet red. That's when I looked to my right and saw a little private beach. "Yo, I'm going over there. We can pull the boats in and catch our breath on that tiny shore." We used the last of our strength to paddle over to the tiny private beach and drag the kayaks onto shore with us. When I noticed that the beaches had stairs running into the sides of the mountain, this is probably where I should explain how the entire bay was set up. So the houses are built on top of the mini cliffs, overlooking the bay. From there, the houses had staircases that ran down to the beach. There were 2 sets of stairs. One set led to a majestic-looking house that was beautiful, yet we could not see inside of it. However, the next house itself was clearly visible to us, because the living room wall was made entirely of glass. As we were looking up into the house admiring their beauty, someone came home. At first, we thought it was just a local. He briskly walked into the room, then oddly turned around to stare at the door. Then about 9 other men entered the room with him. They quickly huddled together in the center and passed something around each of them, which easily could have been a drug deal, until we saw them stop. Paul noticed that one of the guys was staring right down at us on the beach. All of them slowly turned around to face us one by one. My heart froze in my chest. It was then that the first man went over to the door leading outside and opened it up to yell at us. I thought he was going to chastise us for being on the beach, but what he said made me realize this could have ended up worse than it did. "Hey man," he yelled in a thick Caribbean accent from the back porch of the house. Come up and let's talk for a little." At this point, me and Paul were frozen on the spot. "Paul," I whispered, "back away slowly and drag your kayak in the water. Paddle and don't look back." The man was still yelling at us to come up. Then he screamed, "Fine!" It was at this point that we saw him make for the staircase, and two dudes from the living room followed him. I had seen enough. Me and Paul raced towards the kayaks and frantically pushed them into the water. I never did look back to see if they were chasing us. We paddled until we were back in the center of the bay, then decided that we should head back to our parents. I don't know if it was just my young, foolish mind overreacting, but something in my gut to this day tells me that if we had went up to that house, I probably would have never saw my parents again. To be honest, we might have even went up if not for that gunfire earlier. They could have been nice, but who knows? I wasn't willing to take the chance. We got back on the cruise ship later that night, but the memory still stays with me. But hey, cruises are still my favorite. Number 2. My best friend Diamond and I took a trip down a little town called Oxnard on the California coast to visit my aunt. Since we left in the afternoon, we didn't arrive until sundown. My aunt wasn't home, so we decided to head to the beach. When we arrived, it was already dark, but since I hadn't seen the ocean in years, I didn't care. We grabbed our blankets and started for the sand. That's when we heard him. Standing about 200 yards away was a man. He had his back turned to us, and he was screaming and flailing his arms around like some kind of maniac. We tried looking around, but even in the dark, we could tell there was no one else around him to be screaming at. A little weary, we continued walking towards the shore. Excited, I put my blanket down and looked up. The man was now facing us, still screaming and waving his arms around. I looked up at my friend Diamond and told her we could come back tomorrow in the day. We started walking toward the car, and I glanced over. Now, I don't know if it was the dark, but it seemed as if he was closer, still screaming. I looked down, and I asked Diamond if he was looking over here. She looked up and started walking faster. "He's coming towards us." I picked up my pace as I saw my car in the distance. I pulled out my keys from my pocket. Almost there. "Oh shit, run!" I turned to see Diamond running through the sand as fast as she could. Terrified at this point, I turned back to see this man sprinting, full force, in my direction. I let out a loud scream as I bolted towards my car. Diamond was already there, screaming at me to open the door. I climbed in, locked the doors, and floored the gas. I looked in the rearview mirror and see the man, still sprinting towards my car, now yelling obscenities at the top of his lungs. I sped down the street out of the view of this man, out of the neighborhood we parked in. My grandmother was pulling up just as we were, and I broke down and told her everything. She called the police, but since we were in the dark and couldn't see his face, we couldn't give him a description. They said they would go check, but without a description, there was nothing they could do. Diamond and I stayed up all night, too terrified to sleep. The next morning, the police called my aunt. They had checked the area we were at the night before, and they found multiple knives scattered throughout the sand. The last one they found was on the sidewalk, next to where my car was, hidden in some bushes. Number 3. When I was about 6 years old, my family went on a vacation to a beach in Florida. I was a lot younger than my siblings, still am. So while they were doing their own thing with their friends, I was stuck wherever my mom would take me. For the most part, we stayed in the extremely crowded pool area by our hotel, which had direct access to the beach. It's still all a bit hazy, but at some point when I was swimming, I looked up where my mom was supposed to be sitting, and she wasn't there. I was really attached to her, so I got out and started looking around for her. I scanned all the chairs, took a trip around the bar next to the pool, but I still couldn't find her. I got it in my 6-year-old mind that she went for a walk on the beach without me, so I made my way out there looking for her. I walked about a half a mile down the beach, out of the crowds to a more vacant area, and just remembering starting to cry because I thought I would never see my mom again. Just as I had basically given up, a woman and a man came up to me. They asked me who I was, if I had any family nearby, and I told them that I was alone and was looking for my mother. They said to me that they had seen my mother and told me that they would hang out until she came back for me. Well, these people took me about 2 miles away from my hotel. We walked down the beach to a more residential area. They kept insisting that my mom was going to be down on the other side of the beach, and that they were going to take care of me. They tried to get me to build sandcastles with them, play in the water, and even told me that we could leave to get dinner, and they would take me back afterwards. I kept telling them no, and that I wanted to go back up to my hotel so that I could go up to my room and check for my mother there, and that's when they got really upset with me. The woman said to me, "We're going to leave to get dinner at our house, and we'll bring you back to your hotel afterwards. Got it?" I was starting to get really nervous, so I told them that I didn't want to go with them, and that I could walk back to my hotel on my own. The man then said, and I will never forget this,
"You're coming home with us for dinner."
He said it in one of those creepy do it or die kind of tones. I don't know, it just stuck with me. Lucky for me, I heard my name in the distance. There was a group of people yelling for me. I bolted over to them and they asked me who I was. They smiled and said, "There's lots of people looking for you." When I turned around to tell the group that a man and a woman had been hanging out with me, they were gone. The group, which actually ended up being hotel workers, took me back to my hotel where everyone was waiting. And even a news crew was there because I had been gone for over half of the day. The entire hotel pool area had been shut down in efforts to arrange search parties. My mother was sobbing, but it all turned out okay. When I told the hotel workers what happened, they were extremely concerned. Apparently not even a week before, a child went missing in their beach access area. When the kid was found, he claimed a man and a woman lured him to their car, where they forcibly tried to take him home with them, and that's when he bolted away and found another family for help.
There's always a reason to be afraid.